What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. It is time to give you my recap of week number 2 of the 2024 college football season. And what a week 2 it was. I mean, I tell you what, this was a really good weekend of college football. I did mention, of course, throughout my videos, of course, going into week 2 that this was going to be a really good weekend of college football. And that's exactly what we got. We saw a lot of close games, and we saw a couple of big upsets happen. Not a ton of upsets happen, but, actually we should say 3 big upsets happen. How about Northern Illinois upsetting Notre Dame? I don't think anybody saw that one coming. I mean, obviously, I think everybody thought Notre Dame after that Texas A&M game would be really good the rest of the way, but that obviously wasn't the case. So the Huskies pull off the upset there. We'll get to that game in just a moment. We saw Oregon struggle against Boise State. I don't think anybody saw that one coming either. Oklahoma struggling against Houston. Again, a lot of these top 25 teams struggled over the weekend. We saw a couple of upsets, though. Kansas losing to Illinois. That was a big upset there. And then we had Iowa State upsetting Iowa. And I can go down the list here of all these games that were really close, but I'm going to go ahead and give you my 5 biggest recaps. So just like last week, again, I'm giving you the 5 biggest recaps here for week number 2 of the 2024 season, just like how I did with week 1. Week 1 was a quiet one, but week number 2 I feel like was a chaotic one, and that brings me to my number 5 biggest recap. This was a chaotic week 2 of college football. I think everybody can agree on that. We saw a lot of close games, like I mentioned, and a couple of upsets happen. But the biggest upset, again, was Northern Illinois upsetting Notre Dame. Again, I don't think anybody saw that one coming. This is the second time, I believe, that Notre Dame has lost to like a big cupcake opponent. But, Northern Illinois is pretty good out of the MAC and everything, just based off of what happened in that game. They get the game-winning field goal, of course. Illinois upsetting Kansas last night. That was a big upset there. I feel like the Big 12 now is pretty much the front runners going to Oklahoma State and also Utah. Oklahoma State and Utah were both victorious, but they had close games too. Oklahoma State had to go into double overtime against Arkansas, and then we saw, of course, Utah have a little bit of trouble with Baylor, but their defense did prevail in that game. But again, Illinois upsetting Kansas, that was a big upset there. And then we saw Iowa State and Iowa. Again, it was a defensive battle in that game. And once again, the away team wins that rivalry. And I've been saying that, of course, when I did my prediction on that game from this past Thursday, or maybe it was Friday night. I can't remember, but it was Thursday night when I probably said that Iowa and Iowa State, when it comes to their rivalry, usually the away team wins, and that's exactly what we got over the weekend. So, yeah, this was just overall a chaotic week 2 of college football. We saw Alabama, struggle against South Florida in the first half. So, yeah, Alabama struggled over the weekend. We didn't see Texas struggle against Michigan. I mean, obviously, that game wasn't even close. But, again, that was pretty much the only game that probably wasn't even close between 2 Power 4 teams. But, again, this was just a chaotic week 2 of college football. Again, not just chaotic for the upsets, but this was just chaotic because we had so many close games and so many close calls that were really close to being upsets. Again, Boise State almost upsetting Oregon yesterday on the road. I don't think anybody expected a close game there. Everybody was kind of expecting Oregon to bounce back, but we'll get to that in just a second. But again, this is my number 5 biggest recap. This was a chaotic week 2 of college football. Next up, Michigan has some issues. That is my number 4 biggest recap here. Let's talk about Michigan's game against Texas from yesterday afternoon. This was a really bad game for Michigan. I'm telling you, they got some issues, especially on the offensive side of the football. The defense did not do their job from yesterday. Now, going into this game, I feel like Michigan's defense would hold, Texas to probably a fewer points in this one. I was actually kind of predicting a close game and also a low-scoring type game, but I did pick Texas to win this game, and that's exactly what happened. But Michigan, they just have so many issues right now. The offense just wasn't really good enough from yesterday afternoon. The quarterback position might be a little bit of, a weakness here for this Michigan team compared to last year. And I think this is a Michigan team that's kind of going back to their old days under Jim Harbaugh, where they really struggled, especially on the offensive side of the football. The defense, obviously, is not the same, it looks like, pretty much from last year either. So, yeah, I think going into this game, I think Michigan definitely would have had a really good defense to stop this Texas offense, but that obviously wasn't the case. Michigan didn't really run the football in this game a whole bunch. I think that was a key for Michigan going into this game. If I was Michigan's coaching staff, I would definitely try to run the football in this game and really wear down that Texas defense, but Texas just really played their best game of the season. I think that when it comes to like big games, I feel like Texas probably plays their best games and everything, and that's exactly what we got and everything. So Michigan, they have some issues. I mean, you look at Michigan after this loss, I mean, are they going to be really good the rest of the way? I really don't know. I mean, when you look at the schedule for Michigan, they still got to play Oregon. They also got to play Ohio State. Now, when I look at that Oregon game, I feel like Michigan might have a chance in that game because, Oregon obviously has not been really good in the first 2 weeks of the season, but these teams are going to get better. I mean, is Michigan, though, going to get better as the season goes along? It's kind of hard to tell. Michigan, I think, coming into this season, though, is definitely overrated. I think, just overall, after this performance, it just wasn't a really good performance for Michigan whatsoever. So, yeah, Michigan, they have some issues, again, they need to fix, especially on the offensive side of the football. I think the defense is going to get better, but the offense, again, just has to get better and better as the season goes along. And, again, the schedule is very tough down the stretch for Michigan, which means they could probably lose. After this game against Texas and the way they played, they could probably lose more than 3 games this year and definitely miss out on the college football playoff. I wouldn't count any team out of the playoff, though, just yet because this playoff, this 12-team playoff era obviously is giving teams some chances, either with just like 4 or 3 losses and everything. We could see a 4-loss team out of the Big Ten be that number 2 seed or maybe that number 3 or number 4 seed. But again, I got Michigan here at number 4. This is my number 4 biggest recap. Again, just after what they did against Texas, they have some issues that they need to fix. So Michigan here at number 4. Number 3 biggest recap, Nebraska is a much improved team. This is not a big recap here, but Nebraska, they have been really impressing me with their first 2 games of the season. This is definitely a completely new Nebraska team that we've seen over the last few years, and especially from last year under Matt Rule. They got a quarterback that definitely is the future of this team. And you look at their game against Colorado, Nebraska was really dominant on the defensive side of the football. The first half, they were scoring some points on this Colorado team as well. Colorado could just not get anything going here in this game. Nebraska, their defense just overall pretty much dominated that Colorado offensive line. That obviously was the biggest concern going into this year for Colorado. It was going to come down to their offensive line. It was also going to come down to their defense to make the stops. And this game just right here proved to us that Colorado might be overrated. So, and again, I think Colorado was going to be a pretty good team. But I did not, predict them to go to like a Big 12 championship or definitely not even come close to make to the playoff and everything. I thought they were going to be much improved, though. I thought they would at least win like maybe 6 or 7 games. But now when I look at this Colorado team, they probably won't make it to a bowl game just based on this performance, but it's just 2 weeks in. These teams are going to get better and better as the season goes along. But this was just a bad game for Colorado, and I don't think Colorado's for real this year, but Nebraska is a much improved team in the Big Ten. And speaking of the Big Ten, boy, how about Penn State struggling against Bowling Green yesterday? We saw Michigan and Penn State both struggle. I mean, obviously Michigan losing to Texas. I mean, obviously I predicted Texas to win, but I did not expect Penn State to struggle against Bowling Green. They only won that game by 7 points. So the Big Ten, it could be wide open. Oregon struggling against Boise State. I mean, we're not seeing that those top teams really have like really good first 2 weeks of the season. Now, Ohio State might be the best team in the Big Ten right now, just based off of what Oregon has done so far in the first 2 weeks. And also Nebraska, I think, is a dark horse contender. Again, just based off of how they played here against Colorado, especially on the defensive side of the football. The offense wasn't really good in the second half, but Nebraska is a much improved team just based off of what I've seen after they beat Colorado here in this game. So, again, Colorado, they have some things to clean up. Obviously, they really couldn't protect Shadir Sanders in this game. The offensive line just really struggled, to protect him. And this game was kind of similar to last year. Nebraska actually blew out Colorado in this game. Colorado blew out Nebraska last year, so this game was definitely a lot different compared to last season. But again, Nebraska, we're talking about them in this number 3 recap here. This is a much improved team. They got a future at quarterback. I can't remember his name and everything, but Nebraska again just has a future with him at quarterback, and I think Matt Rhule is going to do a really good job this year. And based off of the first 2 weeks, Nebraska hasn't really had a close game just yet, and this was actually their first kind of real competition. And if they can win those close games, Nebraska is definitely right there among one of those dark horses and maybe a top contender if they were like to pull off an upset at the end of the season or anything like that. I mean, if they can pull off an upset somewhere in the middle of the season, this Nebraska team is definitely going to be right there in a Big Ten championship spot. So watch out here for Nebraska. They are a much improved team just based off of their win against Colorado last night. So Nebraska here, the number 3 biggest recap. Nebraska is a much improved team. All right, these are the most important recaps here, number 2 and number 1. Starting with number 2, I think the group of 5 is ready for the college football playoff. I mean, obviously, let's just start things off with Northern Illinois and Notre Dame. Big upset there by Northern Illinois out of the MAC and everything, getting a game-winning field goal. Their defense, of course, played pretty well in this game. Notre Dame's offense just could not get anything going. Now, I know this year Notre Dame had a change of offensive coordinator, so maybe that's the reason why Notre Dame just wasn't very explosive on the offensive side of the football. And I think after that game against Texas A&M, they were probably celebrating too much after that victory. And I think Notre Dame probably also was kind of beat up as well, basically just after playing Texas A&M. Because once you play a game the next weekend against a really good Power 4 team, especially in Texas A&M, which I think Texas A&M is a really good team still, but after you play like a really good powerhouse team, like, for example, Clemson playing Georgia, Clemson obviously took care of business the next weekend. I thought they were going to be all beat up after, playing against Appalachian State, but I think, Clemson definitely showed why they were still really a good team, and they beat Appalachian State pretty easily. But I thought Clemson was going to be beat up after they, lost to Georgia from this past weekend. Notre Dame, I think, was beat up after that, game against Texas A&M, and I think going into this game, I feel like Notre Dame would probably, pull away in this one, but Northern Illinois just kept getting stops on third downs, and Notre Dame just could not really move the football down the field. And this is a very disappointing loss here for Notre Dame. Do I think they're out of their the playoff picture and everything? I don't really think so. I mean, this is just a really unbelievable loss here for Notre Dame, but at the same time, I feel like this is another disappointing loss here for Notre Dame, and it's also a very embarrassing loss if you're a Fighting Irish fan. Again, you had that big win over Texas A&M on the road, and I think they probably celebrated too much, and they probably were just beat up in that, and after that game. They didn't really recover in time for this game against Northern Illinois. But again, this Northern Illinois team, I think, showed us why the group of 5, I think, is ready for the college football playoff. You look at the other group of 5 teams, Memphis, they will play, of course, Florida State coming up this weekend. If Memphis can win that game, I feel like the group of 5 will definitely be ready for the college football playoff, even though they're going to be a number 12 seed. But again, these teams are going to get better and better as the season goes along, and maybe the group of 5 team won't be able to compete, especially when they're playing on a home turf and everything against a Power 4 team. But you look at, Oregon and Boise State. Boise State lost by a field goal, game-winning field goal in this game for the Huskies against Notre Dame, and then Boise State lost by a field goal to Oregon. So, yeah, I think the group of 5 had a really good weekend. Even though, Boise State lost to Oregon, you got to give them some credit for competing in that game, especially playing on the road. And then for Northern Illinois, of course, they get a big win here over Notre Dame, a top 5 team. Yeah, Notre Dame was ranked actually in the top 5 after their big win over Texas A&M. So yeah, I think Notre Dame probably just the top 5 spot kind of shook them up a little bit, and they probably are just not a top 5 team whatsoever. I still think Notre Dame is a really good team, and they're still a playoff contender, but this was just a very embarrassing loss here for this Notre Dame team, and also one of the worst losses that I've seen in a while. And remember, this is not the first time that Notre Dame has lost to a group of 5 team. They lost to Marshall a couple years ago. Remember that? That was Marcus Freeman's actually his first season as the head coach. So yeah, this is 2 losses that Marcus Freeman has lost to in a group of 5 team. So yeah, this is the number 2 biggest recap. The group of 5, I think, based off of what we saw with Northern Illinois upsetting Notre Dame, and then also Boise State's competitiveness against Oregon on the road. I think the group of 5, I think they're ready for the college football playoffs. So this is my number 2 recap. Let's go to the number 1 most important recap, though, of week number 2 of the 2024 season. It's not a big recap. I think Texas, though, is ready for the SEC. You look at Texas, of course, big win on the road at Ann Arbor against the Michigan Wolverines. I was just very impressed with Texas's performance here. You look at Quinn Ewers, he was really consistent throwing the football. And again, like I said with Texas, I think when it comes to like these big games, I feel like Texas probably plays just their best game of the season. This goes back to, of course, a couple years ago when they played Alabama pretty tough, even though they lost that game by 1 point. And then they beat Alabama, of course, from last year. Then they go on the road to beat Michigan here the next year. So, yeah, Texas is definitely for real this season. And, again, when you look at that win over Michigan, I think they definitely deserve a lot of credit. Again, I think this Texas team might be the best team in the country right now. Even though they're not the number 1 ranked team in the country, Georgia is number 1 and Ohio State's number 2. Texas might be the best team in the country. They have probably the best offense in the country, maybe besides Tennessee. Tennessee, of course, took care of business against NC State. They scored 51 points and won that game like 51-10. So, yeah, Tennessee and Texas might be the 2 best offenses in the country. And then you can count Georgia in there with a really good offense as well. Georgia took care of business against Tennessee Tech. But I think Texas, we're talking about them here, they are ready for the SEC just based off of what I've seen. Again, the offense just very explosive. I really wasn't expecting to score 30-plus points on this Michigan defense. I thought they would get held to like maybe 20 points and maybe create a close game. But either way, Texas gets the win on the road at Michigan, and they get a big win here to try to, say they're definitely ready for the SEC. And again, you look at Oklahoma, the other newcomer, they struggled against Houston, so maybe Oklahoma is not quite ready just yet, but we'll find out how good Oklahoma is against an SEC team in a couple weeks. They'll play Tennessee, of course, at home. That'll be a big game there, and that'll be a big test there for Oklahoma against a really explosive Tennessee offense. But I think Texas is ready for the SEC just based off of what I've seen in the first 2 weeks. This was a big win, though, and that kind of really realized that, Texas definitely is ready because they got to win over a Power 4 team. And now when I look at that game against Georgia, I feel like it could be a really close game, and I feel like Texas might have a chance to pull off a huge win there. And in Texas's schedule, it's not really that horrible. I mean, it really sets up well for them to possibly make the SEC championship, and also they probably have a chance to get that number 1 spot in the college football playoff. Again, you look at the AP poll, Texas might actually be number 1 if the AP poll comes out today. So, yeah, stay tuned for that. But I think Texas is definitely ready for the SEC just based off of their win against Michigan. So that is my number 1 biggest recap here of week number 2 of the 2024 season. So that is my recap of week number 2 of the 2024 college football season. Again, a lot of chaotic, a lot of chaos happened here in week number 2. A couple of big upsets, maybe 3 upsets, I should say, and a lot of close games. So the college football season is definitely getting interesting. We'll have my updated top 25 tomorrow, but this is my recap here of week number 2 of the 2024 college football season. Let me guys know what you think about these 5 biggest recaps, and also give me your 5 biggest takeaways from week number 2 of the 2024 season. Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned for more here on the Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.